Hi friends! I grew up as a third culture kid. I'm sure some of you know what this is like. 2 languages, 2 cultural identities, and always a sense of not belonging completely to either. You know who else was a third culture kid? Moses. He basically had an open adoption, raised in Pharaoh's palace as a son of a princess, but also knowing he was a son of a Hebrew slave. He very naturally would have felt that a part of him was out of place in either palace or field, and that he belonged completely to neither. Moses was a man of action, with a heart for the oppressed and vulnerable and outsider. Just look at how he rescued Jethro's sheep-herding daughters from bullies as soon as he arrived in Midian in Exodus 2. But his attempts to use his position and dual Hebrew-Egyptian identity to stand up to oppression had already backfired on him. And fleeing to Midian, the lack of a home and solid identity was so heavy on him, he named his first child Alien in a Strange Land. That's how he felt. No matter where he was, always the outsider, the alien, the oddball. Then God shows up in a burning bush and calls him to go back and lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. Exodus 3:11-12 says, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?' And God said, 'I will be with you.'" So when Moses says, "Who am I that I should go?" I think it's not just insecurity about his ability to handle the task, though that's certainly a part of it. He's genuinely asking the question, who am I? God, tell me, I don't know, who am I? I talked before about how God called Jeremiah and patiently answered all his objections and insecurities. This passage is very similar. Like Jeremiah, God tells Moses who God himself is and shares what he will do. But I think this is God's answer not just to Moses' fears about what is being asked of him, but also an answer to his identity crisis. An answer to Moses' desperate query, who am I? God says, I will be with you, and I will give you reassurance that I have sent you, and let me tell you who I am. God sometimes changes people's names, gives a sharp turn to the trajectory of their life by just handing them a new identity, like with Abraham, Jacob, and Solomon. These are beautiful moments, but I find it really interesting that God did not do that with Moses. Instead, he invited Moses to find his security in who God is. He didn't give Moses a new name, he told Moses his name. As far as we know, he's the first human with whom God shared this kind of self-revelation. You want to know who you are? Let me tell you my name. I am that I am. A.W. Tozer says, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Our belief in God's existence and our conception of his character and what we imagine him to be like will affect how we see ourselves and how we live." This is a much deeper basis for identity than how you were raised, your culture, ethnicity, what language you speak, where you live, where you went to school, what you do for work, what shows or bands you like, what sports teams you root for, or who you know. Do you believe there is a sovereign, almighty creator of the universe? And do you believe that he loves you and created you with purpose? C.S. Lewis counters Tozer by saying the most important thing about us is actually what God thinks of us. I think they're sort of both right. Jesus said, "This is eternal life, to know the Father and Jesus Christ, the one he has sent." The most important thing we can know is who God is. But if we understand that he is a God who so loved the world he created that he gave his only son so that whoever believes in him would not die but be with him forever, then we know that he made us and loves us. And the very core of who you are, your essential being, the intrinsic you, began in his imagination. And he loved you enough to say, I want there to be one of these in the world. If you know him well enough to know that he thought of you before the world began, then what he thinks of you becomes the most important thing about you. So when Moses cries out, "Who am I?" God's response is, "Let me tell you who I am, so you can understand who I made you to be." Go in peace, walk in love.